welcome to the National World War II Museum's podcast series, Service on Celluloid. This podcast is brought to you through the generous support of the Albert and Ethel Hertzstein Charitable Foundation. Each week, our in-house experts sit down with special guests to discuss depictions of World War II on film. Sit back and get ready for a lively debate that will reveal the good and bad of how Hollywood shows the 20th century's most dramatic event. My name is Seth Paradin, historian and digital content manager here at the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. And today our special guests are Adam Foreman, student program specialist.
Hey, good to be here, Seth.
Kristen Burton, teacher, programs, and curriculum specialist.
Hello.
And last but not least, Josh Schick, curator here at the museum.
Hey, Seth.
Today we will be discussing the 2006 film Flags of Our Fathers. Flags focuses on the battle for Iwo Jima and the story of the Marines and one Navy corpsman who raised an American flag on the top of Mount Suribachi 5 days into the 36-day battle for the small island. The moment the flag was raised, Associated Press photographer Joe Rosenthal snapped an image of it, and that picture became one of the most iconic images in human history. The movie focuses on the struggles and issues dealt with by the surviving flag raisers as they are more or less forced to go on a bond tour at the end of the war. Flags of Our Father stars Ryan Phillippe as John Bradley, Jesse Bradford as Rennie Gagnon, Adam Beach as Ira Hayes, and many more. Film is directed by Clint Eastwood, produced by Eastwood, Robert Lawrence, and Steven Spielberg. It was written by William Broyles and Paul Haggis, based on the book of the same name, written by James Bradley. Film was both a financial and critical success. So, we're going to start off as we always do. Dr. Burton, how accurate is Flags of Our Fathers?
Well, I mean, that's a good question because everything in the movie tends to jump around quite a bit, and the whole movie revolves around this question of who did what. There's a lot of confusion as a central theme of the film. From what I've looked at and from what I understand about Iwo Jima and also the controversy of the flag raising, it seems pretty accurate to me in terms of the initial understanding of who named names, who was believed to have raised the flag, the fact that there were parents, the mother in particular, who recognized her son. All of that seems to play out as it appears. Granted, it is based on the book and is based on this son's research, and we can get into the accuracy of that in general. But the film is built on this question of confusion to begin with. Mm-hmm. So as far as that central theme and topic goes, it seemed pretty on point to me.
Adam, what do you think?
I agree with everything that Dr. Burton just expressed, but on top of that, I think that the film does an okay job at depicting the Battle of Iwo Jima itself, as far as the brutality of the fighting, as far as the ferocity of the fighting, but it does a really poor job at describing how long the battle actually was. So it doesn't really give that sense of the length of time. But it really does a good job at expressing how the Japanese defended the island and how desperate I think the Japanese situation really was on the island. I think it does a really good job there because it's a story being told through the eyes of Doc Bradley's son and his exploration of his father's story. It really leaves gaps in the story. It really kind of jumps around a lot, just like you were saying, Kristen. And so I give it a solid 50-50 on accuracy.
Josh?
I think it's a pretty accurate film for what they knew at the time, and a surprisingly accurate film for getting one of the razors wrong, just because they didn't know at the time. So
and I think the key word is what they knew at the time.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's across the board. Obviously, there's always going to be shortcomings in any film as far as some things go, but I mean overall, it's a pretty solid movie.
I would agree with you, Josh. I think it again, we've said this 100 times before. Like any war movie, it has its high points and low points, but there are scenes in there that are pretty accurate. And I'm not even talking about the combat because, we got to remember that the movie's not about Iwo. Mm-hmm. I mean, it takes place, part of it takes place on Iwo Jima, but it's about these six, but these three guys who go back home. That's what the movie's really about. And as far as that is concerned, as far as their experiences on that war bond tour, for the most part, it's really accurate. I mean, it's like dead on. I mean, there's a few things here and there, but by and large, their experiences here in the States is what you see in the movie is what happened to them. Mm-hmm. As far as the fighting on Iwo is concerned, there's scenes in there like when they're hitting the beach and it is just chaos. And and there's scenes when they're I'm sorry, let me step back. When they're hitting the beach and there is nothing going on, and then all of a sudden there's chaos.
Right.
That is dead on. I mean, that happened. That's how the Japanese defended the island. That's how the initial fighting went. And then as far as the patrol up the hill, up Mount Suribachi, I don't really necessarily want to call it a mountain because it isn't. It's an extinct volcano. But But as far as that is concerned, again, that's how that happened. That's how it went down. So, it has its high points and low points. But I would tend to agree with you, Josh, and that it's more accurate, I think, than we might necessarily say. But again, to everybody's point, it hits and misses in certain spots. Mm-hmm. And you touched on it briefly, Josh, what they knew then. And it brings me to this talking point. With the recent revelation that two of the flag raisers identified in 1945 are not actually the flag raisers coming to light in just the last couple of years, does it diminish the story in any way?
I don't know if I would say it diminishes it because Adam and I were discussing this earlier. How hard must have that been for Doc Bradley's son, who wrote this book in 2000, truly believing that his father was a flag raiser because that's all he understood. And I think he mentioned something at a certain point about how he knew nothing about what his father did during the war when his father died. And so that's why he went on this investigative tour, interviewing all of these people. But to find out in 2016, 16 years after this book comes out, that his father actually didn't raise that flag, that must have been hard. Oh,
no doubt. I mean, I'm going to answer my own, because this was my talking point. I'm going to answer my own. Does it diminish the story of what they're trying to tell? And I just said what they're trying to tell is it mostly, really, honestly, is about the 7th War Bond Drive. I mean, that's what that movie really, honest to God, is about. Does it diminish that? No.
That's what I was going to say, is the flag in the moment is ambiguous anyway because they're all facing away, and I think that's what makes it such a great, like, that could be any one type thing, and then it's this huge focal point of it. So I think looking at it from two perspectives, there's the perspective of the moment, and it does tell the story, and regardless of whether or not those guys pulled the flag up, they were on the 7th War Loan Drive, and that was a major contributing factor. As far as getting the guys wrong and it not actually being two of them, I think a lot of people look back and go, okay, that's interesting. That's been corrected by history, but still doesn't change a moment, and I don't think it changes the story of it either.
And yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, the fact that and we could talk about this, that Doc Bradley knew, he had to have known. I mean, you could not know that you were not one of those people in that image. Why didn't he come forward?
Yeah,
I don't know.
He did push a flag up. He pushed number one up.
He did, no doubt.
So, I mean, if we want to start chopping hairs, man's not a liar. No. I don't think the man ever was a liar either. Mm-hmm. I just think he knew, my belief is that he knew that he wasn't in that picture. He needed to go along with it.
Yeah.
It was his mission at that point. He could have been dressed by down at someone and said, well, hey, I'm not it. Well, too bad, dude. You are, and you're going on this lone drive because most of you guys are gone.
And that essentially happened, or tried. It was Ira Hayes was, he was like, I don't want any part of this, and they forced him to go.
Yeah.
He made it abundantly clear.
Yeah, and Ira actually,
he wanted no part of it.
Ira actually did threaten violence against Gannon, who was the one who named Ira to begin with.
Right.
But I don't think it changes the. Or diminishes the story. I think it certainly gives us a different lens to look through it. It allows us to say, okay, why did Gannon and Doc Bradley decide to keep quiet? Why was that decision made? Was it because they didn't want to go back to battle? Was it because Iwo Jima was so bad that they just, they wanted to get away for a moment? And that's a level of humanity that we don't often try to explore whenever we're talking about, especially Marines during World War II. So it kind of gives us a different lens to be able to ask those types of questions. And of course, both of those men are passed away now, so you can't really ever find answers to those questions. But it certainly gives me a different lens to see the film.
So I think you could bring up the topic of Bradley and Gagnon not wanting to go back. I don't think anybody wants to go back and get shot at. But in Doc Bradley's case, he was a little more reluctant to be pulled off the line. And Gagnon, he was a runner, not taking anything away from anybody doing that, but Doc was in the front lines. Gagnon was more often than not in the front lines. And, the stories are there of Gagnon and his wife, or soon-to-be wife later after he got home. They were trying to capitalize on it. That is a fact. They were trying to monetize this. He thought he had a future in movies. She thought she had a future in movies, and she was nothing but his wife after he got home. Again, not taking anything away from the family, but, God bless them. But, it's a fact that, they tried to monetize, and Bradley was like, And Ira wanted, we've already said this, wanted nothing to do with it. And then the two flag raisers who actually were there, Harold Schultz and Harold Keller, they never said a word. And they knew they were in that image. They knew that what they had done. They never said a word.
I think the movie does a pretty good job of showing the pressure that the men were under to maintain that narrative. Because
no doubt.
There's that scene where they first meet the fellow organizing the bond drive. And they say, oh, that's not so-and-so, that's actually Harold or whoever. That's not Harry or Hank or whoever. Hank, yeah.
Harlan Block.
That's Harlan, yes, thank you. And he says, well, that's the name that the public has, so that's the name we're sticking with, so you're sticking with it. And I think the movie did a pretty good job of showing that they tried to push back, and that got shut down really quick.
Well, you're talking about Ira pushing back, because he has a moment in the movie where I forget the officer that he's speaking to, what his name was.
Forgot the guy too.
In my notes, I just put down the handler.
The one that's like
what he was.
Bringing him around everywhere.
Well, they're calling him Roger Sterling. I was like,
But he straight up says, "Are you deaf? This is not who this is." And they wound up, obviously, they corrected that mistake then. But it's a sticky situation, because when you call in, we're talking about this right now, and you're calling in, the legacy of people who were made famous by, for better or worse, by the Marine Corps and by the United States. Well, by the United States, and it's. Did they or didn't they? No, they did not. But
I think
they played a role.
I think it depicts their story very well, because it is not so much made famous. Like, they were definitely of note, but they totally used those dudes.
Oh, totally.
You know, and that was the whole point. I think of like Ira's. Hey, no, this ain't it. Like, that's the frustration boiling out. But in reality, all the wheels are set in motion. They need money. Right. Money is a king of all. And so regardless of the narrative of the story, and so what you're saying is, I like how they showed the three guys, Gagnon trying to capitalize, Bradley just kind of rolling with it, probably not too happy, and Ira Hayes not happy with it and very much affected by his service, because he didn't just fight at Iwo.
Right. Right. He was a paramarine.
Yeah. So there was a short blip in the film. It was one of those random throwaway lines that we were talking about earlier, Kristen, that whenever it was a moment in the film where Roosevelt was saying, "Oh, we've been looking for this picture. We've been looking for this picture," and then, "Oh, this is it." So they were looking for. According to the film, they were looking for that PR gold,
which is accurate.
So you're right. They absolutely did use these men, these Marines, but because the picture was more of an accident than anything else, it just seems to kind of just fit with what the mission was at the time.
And as I remember, it was after Roosevelt saw the picture, he wanted the names for the purpose of raising money.
Exactly. After FDR saw the image. And not necessarily that he saw the image, that he saw how popular the image had become so quickly.
The image.
Exactly. That he kept seeing the image. That's a more proper term, that he was like, I need to know who these people are. I want them out of combat. I want them home now. And of course, by that time, 3 of them had been killed in action. And actually, the 2 originals, the Keller and Schultz, had been wounded, and they were gone. They obviously survived, but they were gone. So, there were only 3.
And then Roosevelt dies.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And Bradley had been injured in combat as well.
Right,
and he was,
he was wounded too.
In Hawaii or Oakland or someplace at a military hospital by the time.
I don't remember where he was, but yeah, he was hurt too.
He didn't finish the battle out.
It was an extraordinary turnaround. So between Rosenthal taking the photograph and it appearing on the front page of most of the newspapers in the United States was like 19 hours.
Yeah.
It was an extraordinary turnaround for that time. And that's
Cool technology, wire photo, man.
Right.
You think you're fancy
Yeah.
taking a picture of something and texting it nowadays. They literally
Yeah.
came up with a fax machine. The photo hit Guam, I think, within 4 hours of
Yeah.
him turning it in.
Yeah, I
and
have
then it
here
gets Guamed back.
distributed by the Associated Press within 17.5 hours after.
I mean, that's
shot.
extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary.
All right, so the sequence of events, and we kind of touched on this, Kristen, you did. The sequence of the events in the story, they're not chronological. I mean, there's some instances that are, obviously, jumping around from fighting to being back home in the States and back and forth. Was this film easy to follow, and why do you think it was told this way?
I didn't think it was particularly easy to follow the first time I watched it. It makes a lot more sense when you go back and rewatch it. Why it was told this way, I wonder about that, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I kept wondering while watching it if there was some sort of intentional juxtaposition between the fighting and conflict in the military, on the military side, with the actual battle on the island and the experiences of the soldiers kind of informing their actions on the home front. But then also there's a very different kind of conflict happening on the home front as well. And so you have two different forms of tension that's being put against each other in the way the movie's shot, and it's jumping back and forth. And I don't know if that was supposed to, one was supposed to inform the other or not. If that was the case, I think it did about it got about halfway there and succeeding. But overall, I found it more confusing than not.
So that's actually how the book is framed. So the book very much talks about how the discovery of the son, and so he discovers part of his father's story.
James Bradley.
Yeah, James Bradley. So he discovers part of his father's story, talks about the bond drive, and then flashes back to, what. So the book very much is disjointed in that same manner. It translates better in print than it did in film. But I actually kind of liked some of the transitions where they, some of those PTSD triggers are what gave us, transitioned us back into those flashbacks. So whenever they were charging up the paper mache mountain to plant the flag and the fireworks are going off, and then you see Ira's flashback, because the fireworks are getting to him. And so each of the men kind of had a different series of flashbacks, and they were set off all by different types of triggers. So it was a really cool storytelling element. I just think that it translated really better in the book than it did on film.
I would agree with that, and I always thought that they were flashbacks. I always looked at it when they would go back and forth, that it was a flashback because the movie was supposed to be taking place in the United States, and everything you see on the island is a flashback in some way, shape, or form from one of those three guys. That's how I looked at it anyway.
I did the same thing. I think the intention, and I thought it pulled it off pretty well, is to try and put you in their shoes. Their hotels, they're doing all this stuff, but tearing away in the back of their mind are Marines getting blown up, are horrible struggles against insane defenses, are just god-awful, terrible things, are the epic moments leading up to an invasion, as, you see shore fire bombardment or your initial waves, or the shock of, getting to the beach and going, is anyone actually here? And so I think they, like you're saying, spin that stuff in there to try and show you what's really tearing these guys apart while they're selling loans.
So just to challenge you a little bit, Seth, I say that the whole film is actually a flashback because the film is bookended by the son doing oral histories on both ends.
Yep. No, you're right.
So I think that the whole thing is actually a giant flashback, and so
and then it ends with the not ends, but towards the end is the dedication of the memorial there in D.C. Yeah. No, you're right. So the battle for Iwo Jima was geographically small, but epically complex. Is this movie able to communicate the complexity and the heroism of the Battle of Iwo Jima, and we've been talking about this in a roundabout way, in a respectful way while still focusing on the small unit of men, the flag raisers, of course. Josh, what do you think?
I think that I mentioned it earlier, it misses on the entirety of the battle. I don't think it clearly communicates that this was very early on in the battle. I know it's mentioned, at one point they say it goes on for another, X number of days, but I think it does miss on all of the stuff that happened on there, but I think what it does very well is it does set the tone for how terrible the action was, and it covers this small unit pretty well. It does taper off and just kind of sum up what happens to the rest of them, because they get tossed in to the other part of the line after Suribachi gets cut off. So, I think it's good on the small, but for the whole overall battle, I think we're falling a little short.
Yeah, again, I agree 100%. I mean, this isn't a documentary on the battle for Iwo, although not necessarily a documentary on the battle, but a movie about the fight for Iwo Jima, and that if anybody with the power are listening, please make one, because that would be compelling. It would be really, really good. But, it's a small unit action. Going up that mountain is a small unit action. It was one company, E Company, 28th Marines. I mean, it wasn't, the 5th Marine Division doing it. It was one company of guys, actually one patrol, followed by another one.
Given the context of everything, I mean, it's almost absurd to just say, hey guys, can you go up there real quick and stick this on there? I mean, like, you may get in a firefight, may get ambushed, anything like that.
Which they did. They did encounter resistance as they were going up, so a little bit. But.
But if you think about the counterparts that are also being produced at the same time, things like Saving Private Ryan, right, where it is also a small unit epic, but Steven Spielberg spends a really significant amount of time within the battle scenes, and Clint Eastwood really doesn't in this film. He gives you small little clippets and small little shots of it just to give you that tone that Josh was talking about. So I thought that was a really interesting choice in filmmaking itself, because this is the same time that Saving Private Ryan, all these other large World War II epics are becoming popular.
I did read something I thought was kind of fascinating in the filming. They would put a camera in a couple random little ammo cans for like 30 cal, and they would just distribute them among the guys that were all the extras. And that's some of the footage of them just running, grabbing cans, picking them up, running to where they're supposed to run. And they wouldn't tell them where the pyrotechnics were, too.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Wow. But I think there was, in terms of the battle, it was one of those throwaway lines, just mentioned casually, I think, by Bradley or one of the other men, about how they planted the flag on the 5th day and then the battle went on for 30 more. And I think a lot of people tend to think of that flag raising on Iwo Jima as that's the end of the battle, and it was at the very beginning. Right. And I don't know if that, outside of that one little line, you really don't get that in the film the way it's presented.
No, and you don't. You don't at all. And I mean, if you go back to another Iwo Jima movie that we covered on this podcast, Sands of Iwo Jima, that's how that movie ends, is when they're raising the flag. So it does give not just Sands, but this too, does give the impression in America's popular mind that, when we put the flag up on Suribachi, it was over. No, it was not.
Just getting started.
Frankly, the worst was yet to come. The worst was not 5 days into the event. It was after that, to be perfectly frank. So it does not give the impression, in my opinion.
It's kind of this misdirection of, when you claim, traditionally you claim the higher ground, you've won the battle, whereas the Japanese were fighting most of that battle in Iwo Jima underground.
That's right. They, the popular saying was the Japanese weren't on Iwo Jima, they were in it, which is true. I'll never forget, just on a side note, one of the oral histories that I did from, whenever we interviewed anybody who fought on Iwo Jima, and Marine or Navy corpsman, always asked them, did you ever see the flag go up? Or did you see the flag? Just out of curiosity, And I'll never forget this one guy, a hero of mine, Mike Mervosh, and he answered that question. He says, nope, I was too busy saving my ass to see a flag go up on Mount Suribachi.
That's a pretty good summation of the rest of the battle.
Yeah, pretty much. So a second part to that question, would we need to see more in this movie to really understand the battle? I mean, I'm going to answer that right now and say, yeah. I mean, even though this is about the flag raisers, I think we need an Iwo Jima movie, and this isn't it.
I don't think it fits the bill. I mean, just repeating what we've said, I think the national attitude, it captures the national attitude of the time. Is it flag goes up, boom, it's time to move on. I mean, it's almost a foregone conclusion. We're on the island. Every time we've landed on an island before, we took the thing, so all right, what's next? And next was raising money and moving to the next island. Right. Meanwhile, there's a month of just god-awful, terrible engagement left.
Not only do we need more of the battle for an understanding of the battle itself, but we need more of the battle for an understanding of these characters. I mean, they kind of left the Iggy character kind of just out in the air. Like, we don't really know why Iggy and Doc Bradley were so close. they don't ever explore that. And that's a whole character that went through a terrible, he was tortured in the cavern after being abducted, and we can assume that by whenever they found Iggy's body, but it never explores why they were so close, and it never explores why, it never explores those deeper personal connections between these characters.
Yeah, I think that's another area that the movie doesn't quite capture. The book briefly touches on the relationship between Doc and Iggy, where basically they said you had a partner, you had somebody who was your buddy. They had kind of a buddy system of sorts that was your guy, and you had to stay with your guy. And for Doc's case, Iggy was his guy, and that's why he was so upset when he lost him. But I think that gets back to the earlier point, too, that there's an allusion to the torture inflicted upon servicemen who were captured, and thankfully they don't show it, but it's alluded to but not spoken to in a direct way. And I think that's one aspect of the fighting, not just on Iwo Jima, but in the Pacific theater of the war. It was an incredibly brutal form of fighting that isn't as prevalent in Americans' consciousness of World War II in the Pacific theater of the war.
So not only in finding Iggy's body, but also before they even got off the ship, whenever one of the servicemen were looking at pictures of the beheadings of American soldiers, and they say, well, this is what happens whenever you surrender, so don't think about bringing your white handkerchief or whatever he says. So they very much do allude to this idea of torturing captured American servicemen, but I really was left craving more about their relationship. I really wanted to know why, because I didn't feel a personal connection to Iggy itself, even though the film was not about Iggy. He was clearly an important person in Doc Bradley's life.
And most of the portrayals that we follow with the three main guys in the film, it's more conflict than camaraderie.
Right, and I think there's several reasons for that, not the least of which is that Ira Hayes, I mean, let's be abundantly clear, he was a problem, on the tour. He had demons, and not the least of which was PTSD and alcoholism. And he was not a fan of Rennie Gagnon at all. Like, not just in the film, but in real life. He couldn't stand him because, Ira Hayes felt like Gagnon sold him out, number one, and Gagnon was out for his own glorification, which he was. And number three, Gagnon wasn't a frontline Marine, whereas they all respected Doc because even though he wasn't out there pulling triggers, he was out there saving lives. He was getting shot at and he got hit. He was wounded. So, I mean, there was a relationship, if you go back and think about it, between Doc and Bradley and Ira Hayes. There was a mutual respect there, whereas that was not very present for any of them when it came to Rennie Gagnon.
Yeah.
And, it's that whole comradeship and, under fire thing, which Gagnon really, he was there, no doubt, but he did not see the things that Bradley and Ira did.
I liked the way they depicted that interaction, too, because that's a battle that is just so violent and terrible that everyone is existing in a very small sphere. There is no defined line. There is no clear trench lines, no moving like that. It is just you and whoever's next to you in this just little individual hell. And all they're, Mr. Murvash said, too busy trying to save their asses. And it's, it's such at that small level that even someone in the same unit like Gagnon can be totally separate from them and not even part of the crew.
Yep.
And that makes sense whenever Doc left Iggy in the foxhole, and that's whenever Iggy was abducted and Doc was tearing himself up about losing him. And so that makes total sense, that was their small world.
Oh, yeah. I mean, any infantryman is going to tell you that, their world is the person to the right and to the left of them. That's it. That is it. That is their world. Does the movie give a good representation of the preparation for Iwo Jima? We've already talked about the fighting. Does it give a good representation of the prep for the event? I personally think to an extent it does. And Josh, you mentioned the shore bombardment.
Yeah, just big cannons is always fun.
Oh yeah, it's sexy.
It's one of the best depictions of pre-invasion bombardment, I think, in any sort of movie. It's actually understandable, which helps when the ship parks right next to the island so you can see both in the same frame. Rest with, they allude to training, all the transports, convoys moving. I thought all the prep was really good, and I thought the pre-invasion bombardment is controversial. They bring it up, and the visuals of it are not misleading at all.
Right. I think one of the things that they show in there that, initially, if you don't know the history, when you see it, it's shocking is when the one Marine falls overboard and the ship doesn't stop.
And how people were laughing initially.
Because they thought,
we'll just
he'll
get
picked
him
up.
out.
No, they're not going to stop this entire convoy for one guy. As tragic as that may be, it's the truth. I mean, that happened a lot.
Yeah.
Guys,
if a DE can snag him or a destroyer can peel off, maybe they'll pick him up.
Maybe.
But it's, it's the equivalent of sealing a compartment when it's on fire and flooding.
Yeah. I mean, that convoy, that troop ship is not going to stop. First of all, it wouldn't have been able to stop and pick that guy up, number one. Number two, they're not going to do that. Maybe one ship might turn around, but you got a whole convoy of people heading over to this island, 3 divisions of Marines. They're not stopping to pick up one guy.
And even if, you want to maintain secrecy for any sort of operation like this, you generally can't use radio, maybe use TBS, really short range, but then it's signal flags. And, it's playing kindergarten. One ship tries to pass it to the other one. Lord knows where this guy's ended up.
And I thought that
miles away by the time.
It set such a somber tone. It really watching the film. That's a moment where the tone just flips a switch, and and they're laughing when the guy goes overboard. Hawaii's that way, and then they realize, and you see that realization fall on their faces. And that's, for me, when the movie tone just flipped a switch.
That's a good point. There's a couple good gut punches in there that kind of remind you what you're watching and what you're actually talking about.
And there is one scene in there that is just incredibly awesome, and that's when the 2 Corsairs do the low pass over the... Oh, my God, that's cool.
Yes, sir.
And even say on the radio, let's give the Marines a show. It's like, do it.
I watched that on my computer before I came up
All
here.
day
I was
long.
like, oh, yes.
Was the depiction of the U.S. taking advantage of the Marines' fame to raise money for the war bond drive number 7 told accurately? Adam.
So, yes, with an asterisk. So it wasn't just these guys that the United States took advantage of. I mean, so the 7th war bond drive was hugely successful, and it raised its goal was $14 billion. It actually raised $26.3 billion, which at the time in 1945 the total federal government was $56 billion. So it raised a
little more than
a lot of money.
Yeah, like 30-40% of the U.S. budget at the time. Now, war bond drive number 6 raised $21.6 billion. Okay, so it was almost as successful. And the guys they took advantage of for number 6 was the Army-Navy football teams, because Army was undefeated. They were ranked number 1. Navy was 6-2. They were ranked number 2, and they played a football game together. And that was the big show for number 6. So each of these war bond drives really had that big draw, that big show. So number 7, it just happened to be those Iwo Jima heroes. The heroes of Iwo Jima is what they called them, right? But it was, $26 billion is nothing to sneeze at, especially
Certainly not in 1945.
Whenever your total budget is 53. So they were wildly successful in their efforts to raise money, but they certainly weren't the only ones to be taken advantage of.
No, and I mean, I think, it depends on how you look at it and taking advantage of, I mean, these guys were wined and dined all across the country. It's not like they were sleeping in, tents. They were taken care of. They really were. On the flip side of that, they were forced to do this. They were under orders to do this. This was
just
not
another assignment.
Hey guys, you want to come do this? It's really cool. No, it was like, you're going to do this, and you ain't getting out of it.
And prefacing all that by saying, whenever their handler filled up Ira's cup with whiskey to hand it to him while still on stage, his little coffee cup or whatever, at one point of the film, they were feeding these guys alcohol, and so there was very little care, it seemed, for the individuals themselves.
Actually, that brings up a good point, that the handler, I didn't look the guy up if he's a real guy, because you get the clear impression that he gets it. Like, he gets Ira and he gets Doc, and he gets what Gagnon is too. I just that's kind of popped in my head. Like, pouring the whiskey in there, he's not doing it so much to keep the drive alive. He just knows what it needs to do to keep Ira Hayes rolling.
Because that guy's a combat veteran.
That guy's got a rack on him, if I remember. Yeah, he's got some stuff on there.
Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, he says he was at the canal in the movie. I think. It's one of those throwaway lines.
Right.
But he knows. You're right. He's 100%. You're 100% right, and that he knows what those guys are going through, specifically Ira Hayes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he knows what the bond drive is, but he gets these guys, and I thought that was a really neat little element in there. If you pick up on it, it's actually pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the handler's the one who was driving across Texas who saw Ira hitchhiking and didn't stop. So that's the same guy.
Same dude, I think.
And I believe he is real, because at the end credits they had the actual photos of the real individuals with the actor's name next to them, and his photo was amongst the individuals.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember his name.
Yeah, I totally forgot to look into that.
Speaking of Ira, does the movie do a sufficient job in showing Ira's experience from his perspective?
So this was my point that I wanted to get into, and I'm mostly interested in the way they portray Ira's. It's obvious that he has a strong level of survivor's guilt, and probably PTSD. It's as depicted. But there is also a long history of Native Americans and alcoholism that's deeply embedded in the history of what became the United States, going all the way back to early colonization. And that ties into a lot of racism that comes out towards this character. And I didn't know how well the movie did in distinguishing the fact that, was he drinking because of his PTSD and survivor's guilt, or was he drinking because of more problematic overtones?
I think, I know what you're talking
because there's
about.
a lot of, these lines of, is this drunk Indian? It comes up multiple times throughout the movie.
I think that's what the people were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a colloquialism from the time.
It is, or it was. But in my opinion, Ira was, I'm assuming we all here drink, but every now and then things can tend to get out of hand. But in his case, specifically his case, he was dealing with demons, and I'm not necessarily talking about alcoholism. I'm talking about nightmares and the survivor's guilt, which he clearly had. And I'm not a psychologist, but he had PTSD. A blind man could see that, and unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people deal with that kind of thing.
I don't think it was put in, the Native American drinking context. Obviously, there's the clear references. Whenever, especially, he's not a made-up character, he's a real man. It always fascinates me when you see Native Americans depicted in units, because racism did exist. There were issues with it, but they're actually more integrated into the units as just one of the regular guys. Yeah, obviously they're going to make chief jokes and things like that, but they're not split out into port battalions or separate units,
or supply units,
and so it's always kind of fascinated me where everyone's poking the Indian jokes at him, but there are actually a fair amount, not hundreds of thousands, but there's a lot of Native Americans that just joined the Army, served in their units, and he comes across as one of the guys.
Yeah. And alcoholism was a problem for returning service members.
Yeah.
And
I think that's what this is.
We see that depicted in a number of films. I think Best Years of Our Lives gets into that quite a bit. But
it's a problem today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just in 1945.
And to be sure, Ira Hayes struggled with alcoholism.
Sure.
He died, I think, in 1955, and it was deemed, although there wasn't an autopsy done, but deemed that he died from alcohol poisoning and exposure. And I found out there was a song or a folk song written by Peter Lafarge called the Ballad of Ira Hayes.
Johnny Cash sang it.
And Johnny Cash sang it, and Bob Dylan did a cover of it too. So, but and it gets into the fact that here's somebody who was considered a hero, and yet here's how he was treated, and then he died drunk, and according to the ballad, in a ditch.
That's where he was found.
Yeah.
But the the racist commentary was there.
It was absolutely in the movie, yeah.
Whenever the senator said, "Oh, I heard you got him with tomahawks over there on that island,"
and when the guy tries to do the Pima language to him, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I don't understand you."
And then he was like, "Well, don't you understand your own tongue, boy?"
Yeah,
Between the reference of calling him boy and butchering the native language and really just degrading him for butchering their, the racism was most definitely there, and it was depicted pretty widely in the film. I mean, and to say the least, the part where he was kicked out of the bar for not,
or they wouldn't serve him.
Yeah, where they wouldn't serve him.
Native American,
and he ends up in the street with a chair and swinging it at cops. So the racism was running throughout most of this film.
But it's an accurate representation of the times.
And his nickname was Chief.
A lot of Native Americans were nicknamed Chief. It's an obvious moniker, when of that time. And I mean, he, from everything I've ever read about Ira, and I've read quite a bit about him, he didn't take any offense to that. He was like, well, this is what I am, and you want to call me, and I don't care. Because, like you said, Josh, this was not his first rodeo. He was a combat veteran. He was a paramarine. He had seen the elephant. He had done this before, which is part of the reason that he probably had the drinking problem, frankly. And, I think he kind of took a roll with the punches. And it's when he got home and he was, they were refusing to serve him, that's when it set him off. And there's multiple reasons, I think, that why it set him off, not the least of which is he was a drunk at that time. He was an alcoholic. But
also, he was the one who kicked off the questioning of who was actually in the film when he did the trip to the parents' house in Texas. He hitchhiked from Arizona to Texas to tell, was it Harlan Block's family that, hey, that is your son in that picture. And they said it was this other guy, but it wasn't this other guy. And it was because he did that people started looking into the picture a bit more and who was actually in it.
So the film was criticized by Spike Lee for not depicting the African-American contributions on Iwo Jima. Why do you think this was left out, Adam?
So there was a grand total of 2 black people, I think, in the film, and they were on the they were on the ship before they landed.
In the speech.
Yeah, during the speech, we're going to Iwo, yada yada, and then they're talking about, the supply company's landing on this beach, and you company are landing on or this company's landing on that beach, and so the simple reason that black people weren't represented here, black Marines weren't represented, is because that's not what the story's about.
Right.
I mean, there wasn't a single black Marine who helped raise that flag,
and they hadn't landed at that point either. This is early in the battle,
right? So it's I read what Spike Lee said about the film. I don't necessarily agree with him. I do think that there were opportunities that were missed that could have included a black Marine story, maybe in the background or kind of on the periphery, but that's not what this film is about.
Amen. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like we were saying earlier, this movie is not about the battle.
Right. Yeah.
It's really about the 3 individuals on that bond tour.
Exactly. And, you can find negativity. You can find a reason to critique anything. Anything at all. Anything you want to. And in my personal opinion, the fact that he made those comments was just the fact that he was looking to stir a pot.
He was also putting out a movie at the same time.
And he was putting out his own movie. That's exactly right. The story, you nailed it, man. The story is not about that. Yeah. It's about these guys, period.
And I don't dislike Spike Lee. So.
Well, I feel that if this unit had even walked across a group of African Americans on their way up Suribachi, that they probably would have put it in this film.
Sure.
I mean, their attention to detail at all these small level things was excellent.
Absolutely.
And so, we're just kind of repeating everything for each other. I really did. It wasn't an intentional leave out. If you look at the roles, Officer Stewart's mate, that's why you see an African American man aboard the ship. They just weren't near this unit when it was following this action.
So one of the technical advisors for this movie was a guy whom I know. His name was Colonel Dave Severance. Colonel Dave Severance was he was a captain at the time. He was the company commander of Easy Company, 28th Marines, the same guys who raised the flag. And Colonel Dave is still alive, and he has a memory like an elephant. I mean, this man remembers everything. So the fact that the shots, the scenes where they're showing the patrol going up, and the whole story about, telling Lieutenant Schreier to bring up the flag, and, Forrestal wants the flag, this whole thing, that's straight from Colonel Dave's mind, because he was there. He saw it all. He heard it all. He was company commander, so he had access to all of this stuff. He gave those orders to send that patrol up there. Wow. That's why that looks like it does. That's why you see everything that you see or don't see. Because
I was curious to know whether or not the company commander was really that mad about some general wanting the flag that got raised.
Yeah.
That's his flag.
I was really curious about that.
Oh, yeah. No, he totally. Because, his men risked their lives to put that thing up there. He didn't want to put that flag up there. He was ordered to put that flag up there. Colonel Dave thought that it was foolish to do it, but he was like, oh, well, it's orders. I got to do it. Right. Or I got to tell my men to do it. So the fact that they did that, and they put their lives at risk, not once, but twice to do it. He's like, nah, nobody taking that flag. So
But I did like with the second
accurate.
flag, they were like, make it a bigger one.
Yeah, which is true. Which is, again, it's 100% true. The story is really told through the perspective of a son trying to learn about his father, but the viewer ultimately learns less about Doc Bradley, that is true, than any of the other characters. Did the son's perspective shape the portrayal of his father in the film? Kristen.
So I found this very intriguing, that we have three main characters we're focusing on. We have Rini, who's at least presented as an opportunist, taking advantage of this opportunity to try and advance his own career post-war. We have Ira, who is troubled, struggling with survivor's guilt, struggling with PTSD, drinking, and many of the things that haunted, thousands of people who fought in the war. And then we have Doc Bradley, who did his duty. He helped his men. He risked his life even after being injured. Didn't, or at least seemed reluctant to leave, but was sent to a military hospital anyway. And then was sent on this tour, and he did his job.
And then became a mortician.
And then
yes, he did.
Went to work at a funeral home, which was apparently his life ambition before he even went to war. And it's interesting that the film ends, and the entire film is the son's quest to learn about his father and what his father did, or what he thought his father did. And by the end of it, what does he actually know? Because, at the time, he believed his father was still a flag raiser. We now know that didn't even happen. So by the end of the...
He was on the first flag.
Well, he helped secure the first flag.
Yeah, he was there.
He was there, but yeah. But this film ends, and I feel like you have clear definitions of personalities for two of those three guys, and then the third guy is just there, but it's all supposed to be about him. And yet, what do we actually know it's over?
I think it's a depiction of his character. I think you learn a lot about him, and he's a little bit harder to talk about because he doesn't have a drinking problem or he's not self-promoting. He's just a quiet, honorable, and humble man. And when you depict that type of person as a character, especially the classic World War II veteran that don't want to talk about it, it's just kind of what you end up with. Just,
he's a quiet, honorable man who never said he wasn't in the picture.
Not a lot to spin off of.
Well, he didn't. You're right. He never said, but let's be abundantly clear. He was a Navy Cross recipient.
Yeah.
He was a Navy Cross recipient because he put his life in danger trying to save others.
Absolutely. Not so diminishing the service at all. But I found it interesting
heroic beyond all means.
Yes. That it's from the son's perspective, and sure. I think that is ultimately going to shape how his father's portrayed. No doubt. And I think, to your point, I think a lot of that, this is just my opinion, I think a lot of it is that he didn't really know. Yeah. James. He said he didn't know anything. His son didn't really know anything about his dad. Wartime, and what he found out about his old man came from those like Colonel Dave Severance and people who were still alive to be able to relay their memories of him to him, and to that point, him being a quiet guy, he was not like they show Mike Strank. Mike Strank in the movie is your typical Marine Corps sergeant, and by all accounts, that is exactly how the man was. He was the kind of person that people would gravitate towards. He was a natural leader. Whereas Doc was
like you said, Josh, he's a quiet, reserved guy. He's kind of a guy. He's just kind of one of the dudes in the background, which he literally was. But he's kind of one of the dudes in the background, and you know, sometimes those people aren't noticed, and you can't really say, "Oh, yeah, your dad was X, Y, Z," because they didn't know him because he was a quiet guy. He was a loner to a point. I think that maybe that's why it is, because he just didn't know and he couldn't get the information.
And refused to talk about it, too.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that his daughter once said that any discussion of Iwo Jima in the house was taboo, and basically reading a book about that battle was like reading like a Playboy or something salacious. You had to hide it in that household because it was something that he didn't want to talk about at all, and refused interviews until he died, basically.
So how closely tied is this movie to Eastwood's other Iwo Jima film? And we got to talk about that very briefly, Letters from Iwo Jima. And does it cheapen it? Yes. So, next. No. Has anyone seen Letters from Iwo?
Yeah, I have.
You have? I have too. And, there are certain parts of that movie that I think are very good. And it's a different movie, obviously. It's a Japanese experience on Iwo Jima. And then there's other parts, and that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But there are certain parts of that movie that are just grossly fictitious, and it's disturbing. And to that point, a lot of times people tie these two films together for obvious reasons. And I don't think it necessarily cheapens Flags, but it's not doesn't do it any favors either. That's just my opinion. Adam, what do you think, seeing as how you've seen it?
I actually thought that they were complementary. I mean, the Letters of Iwo really give a very, very different story. They're completely different films. It is from the Japanese perspective. It does explore more of the Japanese battle for the island and their I'll call it honor, but their honor and their idea of this is now Japanese homeland. We're not just in the Philippines. We're not just on Guam. We're not, this is Japanese homeland now. This is our soil. So that film really portrays that very well. Whereas on the flip side, the Flags of Our Fathers portrays it as a lifeline for, Iwo to those Marines were actually a lifeline for those damaged bombers coming home. It gives them a space to land safely, and and that's why we're fighting, because we want to end this war. This is a lifeline for our boys who are actually bombing Japan. So it just gives a very different perspective to the same battle and the same experience. So I thought they were complementary. I think you're right that a lot of it is fictitious because it has to be. There was so much resistance to surrender within the Japanese military, especially on Iwo, that those stories are largely quieted. They're
unknown.
They're largely unknown.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll have to do that one next, maybe.
Well, we'll see you then.
Yeah, that's my response is stay tuned, because I think that could actually be a very interesting thing.
We could just cut out that part and just drop it in the next one.
There you go. Well, let's wrap it up. Josh, did you like this movie, Flags of Our Fathers, that is, and would you recommend it?
I did like it, and I would definitely recommend it.
Adam?
Yeah, I like it. And yeah, sure, I'd recommend it.
Sure.
Knowing that history has changed since then. So go in knowing that these guys,
it's still a solid, true story.
I'll argue that history
You're
hasn't
right.
changed. It's just the way you look at it.
The lens has changed.
Yeah.
I'll accept that answer.
Yeah, Kristen.
I liked it. I thought it was well done. And like all Eastwood films, aesthetically, it's beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I agree 100%. I do like this movie. It has its problems, but overall, I think it's very good. And again, if you keep that in mind, what we've talked about here is it is trying to tell the story of these three guys. It's not a story of Iwo. It's the story of these three guys, and really their issues after Iwo Jima. I think you'll get a lot more out of it than if you're going and, I'm going to watch a movie about Iwo Jima, because that's not what this is about. So, yes, I would recommend it. It's a good flick. Kristen, can you sum it up in a sentence or two?
Ooh, conflicted understanding of one of the most iconic images out of World War II and yet still capturing the value of a single image to the war effort.
Adam.
So this film is distinctly darker and more human than a lot of its overly patriotic and glorified rivals like Sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne. A New York Times film review even points out how dark and muted the color palettes are, just to drive home that point of that dark human experience that these men live through. So keep that in mind as you're seeing the film.
Josh.
I think it's a great commentary on this famous image, and I think it does a good job of kind of bringing it up that it's more than just a picture, and that there are real people rolled up in the aftermath of it. So I'm going to stick with that. No big words for me.
I'll take a line from Ira Hayes in the movie, who, in my opinion, is the most compelling character of the entire film. And he says, "I can't take them calling me a hero. All I did was try to not get shot." And with that, I want to thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to hear more about the events we discussed today, tune in to our mini episode next week. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Service on Celluloid. Be sure to rate and review us on Stitcher or iTunes if you like what you hear. I'd like to thank everyone who made this podcast possible, our producer, Mallory Kirk, and our sound engineer, Jeremy Burson. This has been a production of the National World War II Museum.